Hello everybody and welcome back. We'll be starting our revision in 2 minutes. Okay everyone, so we'll be getting started now. So today we'll be going over the paper 1 for your English language GCSE exam. So the paper 1 exam will be your first exam this year, as you all hopefully remember from the sessions. And remember, this exam will be on the 5th of June. Okay, so we don't have long till the start of the exams, so it's fast approaching. You know, these revision sessions will be really vital to the work you do and the progression you make. So it's wonderful that you are taking part, and we want you to take part as much as you can. Remember, we're trying to put on as much as we can for yourselves. So we've got these evening sessions for English. They will run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the same for maths. They'll run at 7 o'clock for English and 8 o'clock for maths. So remember, please do watch both of them if you're studying both. You know, really try and take on board as much as we're offering as you can do. Please do. We've also got our sessions that are running in the daytime. We have Monday's maths revision at Pagefield at 12:30. There'll be free food and drinks as well provided. It will also run at Pagefield on a Thursday at 12:30, but for English. And then at Parsons Walk, we've got it running on Wednesdays and Thursdays in the dinner time. Please feel free to attend those. And remember, we've got our 4:30 sessions as well running each day. Please do attend them, and make sure you're letting the tutors know what you'd like to work on the most, what you're the most concerned about, what do you think would be the most benefit to yourself. You know, this is the time where you can really make a difference to how you do, how well you perform in these exams. So please do make every effort you can do to attend these revision sessions, and really target those areas that you're concerned about, you have any worries about. You know, speak to the tutors. We're all here to support you, and we'll cover whatever you want us to cover in these revision sessions. So we'll get started, and like I say, we'll be looking at paper 1 today. So I'm going to start off with a PowerPoint that we've actually looked at in sessions quite a while ago this now, but we're going to come back to it because it's a wonderful PowerPoint that really goes over paper 1 in a nice structured form. So we'll be looking at the objectives. We're going to revisit and understand the content and requirements of paper 1. You know, we do need to be recapping these basic bits of information. The better of an understanding you have going into the exam of the exam papers, the better you'll perform. We're going to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over those two words, explicit and implicit. So there will be explicit information in these texts. Now, when I talk about explicit information, that's things that are obvious to everybody. There is nothing hidden within it. It is what it says. So, for example, explicit information is, this is a revision session. There, that's it. That's all the information that's needed. That is explicit. It's obvious. This is a revision session. So it is what it says. Implicit is where there's things that are hinted at. It's hinted at, but not overtly said to yourself. So you've got to read between the lines. You've got to think about what was said and how it was said. You know, what was written, how it was written. Implicit information is hinted at. So if I say to you, this is a revision session, they're going to really help you. You know, implicit information that I'm hinting at, if I'm saying they really help you, you can read into that into further detail, but they're going to really help you. I'm maybe hinting at that if you take part in these revision sessions, they're going to make sure that you can pass these exams. You know, I'm not overtly saying this revision session will make sure you pass the exam. You know, I'm hinting at that, you know, these revision sessions will help you. So implicit, you do have to read between the lines. It's like sarcasm. The best way to describe implicit information is sarcasm. When something's said sarcastically, we usually know to think of the opposite. Explicit, it's there, it's on the surface, you don't need to think about it. Implicit, the meaning's hidden, you do have to think about it. Well, what is the underlying meaning there? Okay. We're also going to explain, comment on and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers. We're going to evaluate a writer's choice and methods critically to achieve intention. So we won't get through all of that today, but we're going to make a start on it. So paper 1 section A, what is assessed? So list relevant information from the text. That's going to be worth 4 marks. That's going to be your first question. Second question, you're going to have to identify and explain the effect of language features. Now, it doesn't just have to be language features, it is language in general. So any language that the writers use, you can use. That's going to be worth 8 marks. Then question 3, analyse the effects of structure. That's going to be worth 8 marks. And then finally for section A, the reading section, I'll move that out of the way. Question 4, evaluate a text against a statement. That's worth 20 marks. So obviously that question 4 for this reading section is so important. You know, if you add the other bits up, 8 plus 8 is 16, add 4 to that is 20. So 1, 2 and 3 added up, it's the same amount as question 4 on its own. So that question 4 is so important. Like I mentioned the other day with the paper 2, it's one of the reasons why we really want you to approach this exam. Question 1, get that done easily, 5 minutes, done and dusted, 4 marks, easy. Then we want you to move on to question 4 because it is so important. It is vital that we have a really strong response to that question 4 because it's worth more than anything else on this paper. So question 1, then question 4, making sure we provide a wonderful response to it, because, as you know, the quotes you use for question 4, you can reuse for questions 2 and 3. So, remember, don't be afraid to reuse quotes you've used for question 4 in 2 and 3. You're encouraged to do that. It will help your response if you do that. Then you go to 2 and then 3 because they're worth the even amount of marks. So timings. So in your reading paper, your time is very important. So at the start, spend 15 minutes reading the text. So spend that time at the beginning reading your text through, making sure that you understand it. And then these are the timings approximately you should be doing. Okay, so question 1 should be taking you 5 minutes, 2 and 3, 10 minutes, question 4, 20 minutes, and question 5, 45 minutes. It's really important that we spend those times because, as you can see here, if we think about these questions as a percentage of your GCSE as a whole, because remember, paper 1 and 2 are evenly weighted, that question 5 there, it's worth 25% of your overall GCSE exam. Just going to highlight it there for you. So 25% of your exam, 25% of your whole GCSE is on question 5 of this paper. Question 4 is worth 12.5% of your overall grade for your GCSE language. So that's why those two are really important. If we're not performing well in these two, we're really going to struggle. So we need to make sure that we're wonderful at those things. So what we're going to do today, it's going to focus on life in the trenches in World War I. So we've got some images to kind of give a bit of a background to the horrific conditions in the trenches. So as you can see, you know, it's quite upsetting. There's people there, crowded along the sides. trying to scramble over each other. And as you can see the picture on the right, they're ankle deep in water. Okay, so don't forget there was quite a lot of camaraderie within the trenches, and there's an image showing it just how close and confined to each other they were. The thing to remember is really the camaraderie between these people during the wartime and how closely they lived with each other. So trench rats. Many men killed in the trenches were buried almost where they fell. If a trench subsided or new trenches or dugouts were needed, large numbers of decomposing bodies would be found just below the surface. These corpses, as well as the food scraps that littered the trenches, attracted rats. So the things that went on in these trenches did attract rats. The bodies would attract these rats. Oversized rats, bloated by the food and waste of stationary armies, helped spread disease. In 1918, doctors also identified lice as the cause of trench fever, which plagued the troops with headaches, fevers and muscle pain. So these trench rats were a real problem. It's not just the horrific thing of being at war. You've also got things like trench rats to be worried about, spreading disease constantly, and this is going to come up in the extract. It's good to have a little bit of a background knowledge of that as we approach it. So let's read the extract. Alfred felt something move. It came out of the mud in the dark behind his back, where he sat cold and drowsily slumped against the trench wall. Something small and warmly alive pushed itself between the wooden slats and his battle-dress jacket. It touched for an instant the small exposed area of his pale, dirty skin, just where his jacket and vest were folded and rucked up together. He could feel something struggling and pushing to get past him. He shot up in revulsion. He knew just what it was. A filthy... We'll stop there because this will give you a bit of a background to the question 1. Remember that question 1 will only ask you to look at a certain amount of lines. So if we have a look at this example from a previous exam, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 6. List 4 things about Alfred from this part of the source. So what's really key to remind you about question 1 is you do have to be careful what you're looking at. Okay, so for example, if I'm reading this question, list 4 things, so I know specifically, as we know, we should know this, we're only going to look for 4 things and 4 things only. The other key element of this question is the fact it specifically wants us to focus on Alfred. So if we were to talk about anything else other than Alfred, we won't get any marks whatsoever. Even if it's a piece of relevant information, it won't count, because what we do needs to only cover Alfred. So Alfred felt something move. It came out from the mud in the dark behind his back. So if you said, you know, anything about what came from behind his back, you're not going to earn the marks, but it needs to only be about Alfred. Now, I'm just going to show you some of the things you could mention, because question 1, at this time of year, we don't really want to be covering too much, you know, because you can work this one out straightforward. These are some things you could have had. He felt something move. He was cold. He was sitting in the mud and the dark. He was slumped against the trench wall. He was wearing a battle-dress jacket. He had pale, dirty skin. He could feel something struggling and pushing to get past him. He stood up fast. He felt revulsion. So for that question, you could have had any of those responses. And obviously the key part about this is that those words there. Do you notice everything about this? He felt, he was, he had, he could, he stood, he felt. So they're all about Alfred himself. So when you get the question, make sure you're identifying specifically what the examiner wants you to look at. So now we're just going to look at lines 8 to 16. How does the writer use language here to describe the rat? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, sentence forms. And also, here's a big tip. When you read could, look at that as should. The examiner's there is putting that there to help you. You know, they don't want to say you must look at these things, because you can look at other things as long as it's to do with language. But when you see that you could, I'd always see that as should, because the examiner's picked that out for a purpose. You know, the examiner has specifically chosen the text and the question to revolve around those things. So instead of you could include the writer's choice of, you should include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. let's read the extract. He saw it there, pushing through and twisting its head, saw the wet greasy fur and its mean red eyes. He kicked at it and missed. The rat scuttled out from the tiny gap between the slat supports and ran across the mud. Normally Alfred would have let it go. Rats were, after all, commonplace. But something, whether Pentapanga, hate, loss, pain, boredom, whichever it was, made him chase after it. The creature appeared sluggish, as if it were weighed down with overeating. It had most likely been feeding on what was caught, left behind in the lines and coils of barbed wire which stretched for miles beyond the trench, the terrible, sad debris of dead soldiers, the remains that were left behind after a 6 a.m. push. So that's the extract you'll use for the language question. If we think about it, let's think about the writer's choice of words. So, he saw it there, pushing through and twisting its head. So let's think about the choice of words. Pushing through, twisting its head. It creates a very specific image, those words, don't they? You know, pushing through and twisting its head. It's trying to get into somewhere. You know, it's forcing its way in. You know, are these rats welcome where they are? They're not, are they? Rats are not wanted here. So the writer specifically chosen those words to make the rat seem like it's sneaking into somewhere. It's forcing itself in where it's not welcome. When we think of, we go further through, saw the wet greasy fur. Let's think in stereotypes. When you imagine when you're watching a film, when the villain comes on, what does the villain stereotypically look like? Well, quite often they have slick back hair, don't they? If we think about the choice of words, wet, greasy fur, are those welcoming? They're not, are they? The writer is specifically trying to create this negative image of the rat. And it's plainly obvious here in this next bit, it's mean red eyes. The writer has not said its eyes. Mean red eyes. The writer has used those adjectives to try and create an image in your mind. He kicked at it and missed. The rat scuttled out from the tiny gap between the slat supports and ran across the mud. Normally Alfred would have let it go. Rats were, after all, commonplace. But something, whether Pentapanga, hate, loss, pain, boredom, whichever was, made him give chase after it. The creature appeared sluggish, as if it were weighed down with overeating. It's really quite sad when we think about that part. It's weighed down through overeating. What has this rat been overeating on? Well, unfortunately, it's been overeating on the debris of soldiers. So if you think about that as an image, it's quite haunting, isn't it? This rat is fat because of eating these soldiers, really. Okay, and think about how the character must be feeling watching that. If you think about them, they're probably starving in these trenches, whereas this rat's been eating lots of food. It most likely been feeding on what was caught, left behind in the lines and coils of barbed wire, which stretched for miles beyond the trench, the terrible sad debris of dead soldiers, the remains that were left behind after a 6 a.m. push. Now this isn't to do with the rat, but I wanted to point out about the idea of implicit information left behind after a 6 a.m. push. That's hinting that they tried to go further, but they were stopped, and lots of people were killed and left there to rot. So you could spend 10 minutes answering the question, so if you want to pause it here in future, feel free to pause it here and have a go at answering that question. Once you've had a go at answering the question, bring it in, show it to a tutor, get them to mark it and feedback to you how you're doing. The most important thing to do at this time of year is to practice answering these questions and ask your tutor how you're doing. How am I doing? What could I do to improve this further? What are my strengths? So feel free to pause it and have a go at answering for 10 minutes. So a typical level 2 response would show some understanding of language, some attempt to comment on the effects of language, some appropriate textual detail, some attempts to use subject terminology accurately. So obviously the key word there, as I'm sure you remember from the sessions, is some. So for a level 2 response, you're showing some understanding. We don't want to be there, do we, at all? We want to be at least level 3. clear understanding of how language is used, clear explanation of the effects of language, a range of relevant quotations, clear and accurate use of subject terminology. So when you identify something as an adjective, it is an adjective. When you identify something as an adverb, it is an adverb on there. Okay. You want to show an understanding as to how language has been used. How has the writer used that language to describe the rat? Everything in this extract is obviously very negative, and the writer here wants you to react poorly to the rat and feel a lot of sympathy for the soldier within the trench there. So you can use some comparison so long as you're focusing on that rat. Level 4 at the top in detailed and perceptive understanding of language, analysis of the effects of language, a judicious range of textual details, and sophisticated use of subject terminology. So when we're thinking of our grade 4-5 responses, this is where we really want to be at level 3. So let's look at a wonderful example of how we could have answered this. The writer describes the rat as if it is intent on doing harm. It is, quote, pushing through and twisting its head, which suggests it is determined to squirm its way into the trench. The use of adjectives in, quote, wet greasy fur tells us the creature is oily and slippery, not just literally but also metaphorically, implying that it is sly and cunning, and mean red eyes suggest its evil nature. Red eyes that glow in the dark have connotations of the devil. The rat could even symbolise the enemy at this point, as it becomes a focus of Alfred's, quote, pent-up anger and aggression when he kicks it and chases it across the mud. It has invaded his territory and is the foreigner that doesn't belong there. All the unpleasant vocabulary used to describe the creature reinforces our preconceived idea of the rats being common, dirty vermin. Even the way it moves in a scurrying manner as it's, quote, scuttled out from the tiny gap repulses us. Although the rat is running away, the adjective sluggish suggests it is quite lethargic and struggling to gather speed. So what we see here in this answer, and it's what we've been pushing a lot in our sessions, as you can see from the quotes here. The quotes are short and sharp, they're precise, aren't they, and to the point. There's nothing extra within these quotes. What's really good about here is this person, to an extent, has used the zoom technique, which is really important to us. The more focused you are with your quotes, the better understanding you show. So the shorter your quotes, the better it is, because you're showing a more precise knowledge of how the language has been used. You're showing the examiner that, yes, I know exactly which word is creating the effect here. So, on that note, what you'll see here is this student response is wonderful, not because they identify lots of language features and devices used. The reason this response is so strong is because of the explanation. Lots of students can get stuck by they think that identifying language features or linguistic devices is exactly what you should be doing for this question. The more I identify, the better my response is. It's not the case. You don't need to identify that many devices within this. What the examiner is looking for is your understanding of how that language has been used, to what effect has the language been used. So you earn your marks from the explanation. You don't earn the marks from identifying what language device has been used. So this person has earned their marks from their explanation, which suggests, it implies, suggests. That's where they earn the marks in their explanation. So they don't really earn much by saying, showing the quote of pushing through and twisting its head. They earn the marks by saying, which suggests it is determined to squirm its way into the trench. They don't earn the marks by saying, oh well, greasy is an adjective. They earn the marks by saying it tells us the creature is oily and slippery, not just literally but also metaphorically, implying that it is sly and cunning. That's where this student earns their marks, through their explanation of how that language has been used and to what effect that language has been used. So don't be nervous about identifying lots of language devices. Identify 3 and analyse the effect. And they don't have to be devices, it can just be words and phrases that are used, as long as you are explaining how that language has been used for effect, that's what the examiner is looking for. So on that note, what we can do now is let's just have a brief look at language. So what are adjectives? Adjectives are describing words. So they describe something, and that's how you'll approach question 2 with the most ease and still be able to write a really strong response through identifying adjectives. Like I mentioned the other day, adjectives will always appear in these texts. 100% these will appear. Okay? What adjectives has the writer chosen? Why has the writer chosen those adjectives? I want you to consider those questions when you come up to this question. Why have those adjectives been chosen, and what effect do they create? So the first question you should be thinking is, is it positive or negative? Ask yourself that. Is it positive or negative adjective? And then go in further detail. What does it mean? One thing we want you to avoid is repeating the word. So let's take an example of sluggish from before. If you were analysing the writer's choice of the word sluggish, the one thing you don't want to do is say the writer uses the word sluggish to describe the rat's movement to show that it is moving sluggishly. That doesn't work. You need to show a greater understanding of the word. So what does sluggish mean? It's being very lethargic, isn't it? It's almost drained of all energy and it's slowing down. In your explanation, describe what that word means and its use. Okay, so adjectives is what you should be aiming for with that question 2 response in paper 1. So these are just short, brief sessions to go over key aspects of these exams. So remember, question 1 is worth 4 marks, 2 is worth 8 marks, 3 is worth 8, and 4 is worth 20. Now this is all in regards to paper 1, okay, section A. Okay, because section B is the writing part, so if we're only considering section A here, so first question is worth 4, second question is the language question worth 8, third question is your structure question, and the fourth question is your response to the statement about the text, and to what extent do you agree, or to what extent do you not agree. Okay, it's really important that you don't worry about language features on question 2. If you can identify them, wonderful, but we want you focusing on analysing the choice of words, to what effect have those words been used to. Okay, so thank you for watching today. Feel free to send in any requests to cover anything specific about the exams. Remember, speak to your tutors, email us in any questions you have. If you want the generic Maths and English email, remember that's mathsandenglish@wigan-leigh.ac.uk. Email in any questions at all. Email us in with anything specific you want us to cover during these sessions. And thank you.